Sorry, Dina, do you want me?
Yes, Mike?
I was just asking if you want me on camera when I start talking or not.
Oh, yeah, please. That would be great. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us to hear Mike Cotton speak about from sports to VC, his journey to becoming a founder. We are very excited to have you all here, and we can kind of just go ahead and get started. So the agenda for today, we will be doing the welcome with always the vision and values of Founders Network. And then we'll go through some updates, and then the reason why you're all here. We will hear from Mike Cotton, and then we can do a Q&A. So Founders Network, we believe that this is the lifelong success through peer mentorship. That is what we are based on. That and our 4 major values. So these tenets you will hear over and over. A few of you have been to the last few meetings. You know that we kind of make sure that this kind of goes out to everyone. We believe in authenticity. So the more open you are, the more we can help. The more that you kind of give out to the world, the more that you are able to take in, however authentic you are. We also believe in reciprocity, helping first, paying it forward. We share experiences and connections, not necessarily advice. So we absolutely believe that you can learn more from somebody, from a peer who's gone through the same things that you have. And that's the great thing about this network, is everybody is your peer and they can all share their experiences together. And we definitely recommend you sharing your experiences as well, because you never know who you can help. With humility, ask for help. That is what we are here for. Recognize that you're a sample size of 1, but there are 600 others here who can actually help you. By virtue of you being part of Founders Network or being here, that kind of shows that you are looking for some guidance. So thank you. We also believe in inclusivity. This is an invitation-only network, so trust in the approval process. We vet everybody, and so we want more people to come in and join. We believe in diversity. Diversity leads to more data, and that breadth of data can lead to better decisions and better outcomes. Okay. Number 1, we always want to thank our partners. These partners kind of make a lot of the deals and everything else possible for you. So definitely always want to thank our community, regional, and global and national partners. So we spoke about diversity and inclusion. Diversity is a major factor in Founders Network. So we do have these 2 initiatives. One of them is the Black Founders Initiative, and the second one is the Women's Leadership Initiative. If you'd like to join either one, let us know, because like we said, we really want people to feel like they have this network. These are our new lifetime members. We do have 2 brand new ones. That's Bala and Marshall. They're stuck with us forever. We are stuck with them. It is a great type of relationship. And one of the things that we want everyone to strive for is to eventually get to the lifetime membership. You are here for a reason. You have this great network. Take advantage of it. We have a peer mentor of the week, and that's Ian Godsey. Ian is the founder of Hometown, but he definitely encapsulates authenticity, reciprocity, humility, and inclusivity. He is definitely an amazing mentor. So if any of you would like to reach out to him, you can kind of go and search for him through the platform. So we do have a mentoring program. This includes our webinars, chapter events, and our global keynote addresses. And then if you are a guest here today, please participate, come through. If you have any questions about membership, do not hesitate to send me a message. That is what I am here for. We have taken the pledge, and we really would love it if everybody else did as well. This means that you take 1% of your product, your time and services, or your equity, and give it back to charity. So in order to do so, we've partnered with Finn, and you can take, you can go ahead and scan the QR code, and we already have a pre-funded $10 for you to go ahead and send to your charity of choice. These are some of our upcoming events. We do have 3 webinars coming up in the next 2 weeks, as well as the FN Boost. It's the monthly virtual happy hour. You do not need to be part of a specific chapter to participate in that chapter's events. If you are, let's say right now, we have the virtual chapter holiday party coming up December 8th. But then we're also having some in San Francisco, in New York, Chicago, London. If you're in London, December 8th, just send a message. We can get you registered to go to that event. Like I said, we're all about inclusivity and bringing you in. These are some of our new featured deals and our FN deals. All of this is available on the platform, so please don't hesitate to go and take a look, and let us know if you have any questions about any of these. These are where some of our chapters are. Like I said, you don't have to be part of a specific chapter to join any of their events. If you find yourself traveling and you see something, go ahead and register. And now, the reason we're all here, we are here to hear from Mike Cotton from Sports to VC, his journey to becoming a founder. Mike is the president and CEO of GameLancer Media Corp. It is the largest global social media network for Gen Zs and millennials, and even some Gen Xs. So Mike was previously founder and CEO of Rumble Gaming, global esports and gaming talent agency and media network, and as well as managing director of sports and media at Ryerson Futures. So he is a venture capital accelerator that focuses on investments in early stage technology. Mike also has experience in consulting and creating hockey analytics. So he worked with multiple NHL teams. That's kind of the conversation that we were having before everyone got on. He also worked in for the Mets, Sportsnet New York, Major League Soccer, and before entering the sports industry, he was an economist for former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Couple fun facts about Mike. He is colorblind, so don't be waving any, color things up in the air. Don't want him to get confused there. Sorry, Mike. And also, when he was working for the New York Rangers, he definitely had a chance to meet some amazing people and escort them throughout the area, including Robin Williams, Matt Damon, and Leonardo DiCaprio. So without further ado, Mike, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So hi, everyone. And first of all, thanks to the Founders Network for having me as a speaker. It's always a thrill to speak with fellow founders, and it's a pleasure to be with you all today to speak about my personal experiences in both the entertainment industry and in the startup world, in both venture capital and then subsequently as a founder. As Dina said, in terms of the agenda today, I'm going to discuss my background very briefly, my professional experience, including my time in the sports industry and how I transitioned into venture capital, where I helped build a portfolio of companies in the sports and media industries. I'll speak to how to catch investor attention, how and why I came to found my own businesses. And lastly, I'll discuss emerging trends in media and entertainment, and I'll tell you a bit more about our business at GameLancer Media Corp. So let's get started. In terms of my background, Dina just went over it. I was trained academically in economics. And after completing my master's, I worked as an economist and a policy analyst for former Prime Minister of Canada, Stephen Harper. I did that for 3 years, then decided I wanted to transition into a career in the sports industry. So I moved to New York, and while I was completing my master's of business at New York University, I worked at Sportsnet New York and for the New York Mets, predominantly on the broadcast side, creating original content, shooting B-roll, and then distributing it onto Sportsnet New York, which was the regional sports network for the New York Mets, the New York Jets, and formerly the Big East Conference for those that are sort of college fans. I then worked at Major League Soccer in the front office on Fifth Avenue in corporate communications. And then, as Dina said, moved on into the hockey world. So I was part of a group that founded the analytics department for the New York Rangers, where I developed tools to evaluate trades, optimal player contracts, and salary arbitration methods. After the Los Angeles Kings beat us in the Cup Finals in 2014, I decided to found my own analytics consultancy where I created studies for several NHL front offices, actually 10 to be exact. And these studies range from individual player values ahead of salary arbitration hearings for Brendan Shanahan and the Toronto Maple Leafs, to NHL draft trends and commensurate player values for Kevin Cheveldayoff, who's general manager of the Winnipeg Jets, as well as optimal contract and term value for impending restricted free agents, which was some work I did for Kenny Holland when he was GM of the Detroit Red Wings. I then became probably the first and only human in history to move from New York City to St. John, New Brunswick in Eastern Canada, where I oversaw business operations for the St. John Sea Dogs of the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. My last year there, we had a really great team. We actually ended up with 2 first-round picks in the NHL draft and what was then a record 7 NHL draft selections. While I was with the St. John Sea Dogs, I was also part of a group that received approval from Hockey Canada for the first exceptional status player in the history of the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. And for hockey fans out there, that was for Joe Valeno, who was subsequently selected with the first overall pick in the draft. Joe was actually the first player to be granted exceptional status in the history of the QMJHL, as the preceding 4 were all from the OHL: John Tavares, Aaron Ekblad, Sean Day, and Connor McDavid. 2 comments about sort of my approach to sports and to entering and engaging in the sports industry. I was a big proponent, as you can likely surmise, of trying everything and getting a sense of what you enjoy and what you don't enjoy. I've now told you I did everything from working in broadcast and original content to corporate communications to working in operations, evaluating players. And I was also very deliberate about ensuring I worked both as a cog in a wheel for a large organization, which of course would be characterized by my time with the New York Rangers and Madison Square Garden entertainment company, as well as I really wanted to ensure I gained experience as what I would call a big fish in a small pond. And that was my experience with the St. John Sea Dogs, where I was really running all of business operations with a front office that was comprised of 10 individuals. And I really wanted to have that experience of having greater autonomy over my role and being able to have a direct impact on the organization. So, wanting to have both sides of the coin to balance my knowledge of and experience within the sports and entertainment industry was really important to me within both large and small organizations. In 2016, I left the St. John Sea Dogs and moved back to Toronto to assume the role of Director of Sports and Media at Ryerson Futures. Ryerson Futures was a newly launched accelerator and venture capital firm that was actually founded by a couple of folks named Matt Saunders and Alan Lisney. It was chaired by Nadir Mohammed, who was the former CEO of Rogers. And I came over to essentially run the sports and media division of that firm. And over 4 years, we built it into the largest sports and media venture capital group in the country. Our investments largely resided in early stage tech businesses that addressed market gaps in the sports and media industries. And our vertical focuses included everything from augmented and virtual reality to fan engagement tools to analytics and player evaluation technologies, software, wearables. And as recently as late 2016, our startups that we made investments in increasingly had applications in the esports and gaming industries. So we specifically grew that firm to 220 businesses globally. And our portfolio companies raised a little over $500 million Canadian. We were partnered with leagues such as the NFL, NHL, NBA, and on the traditional media side, we worked with partners like Disney, NBC Universal, and then here in Canada, Rogers Sportsnet. So while working in venture capital, I learned a tremendous amount about what to look for in successful founders, how to evaluate startup investment opportunities, characteristics to look for in businesses that effectively raise capital. And I had a front row seat as well to how to identify red flags. So as most that are listening in are well aware, the most important determining factor when it comes to both writing a check or forecasting whether a startup will make it are the quality and caliber of the founders. Founders that weren't willing to take feedback and pivot their business, or weren't willing to adjust according to market conditions or changing industry dynamics, or feedback that the managing partners gave to them, were those that were most likely to fail. While as successful founders in our portfolio were those who could recognize when something wasn't working and make very quick, swift decisions to pivot the core business, to exit certain sectors, and to enter into others. So sometimes this meant making painful cuts to staff or to specific services or offerings within the company. And sometimes this meant taking their product and repurposing it into industries which weren't even considered upon the company's inception. So we had founders who were extremely hard workers, accepted constructive criticism, and more importantly, acted on that feedback. And these were the type of founders who experienced, 8 and 9-figure exits. Conversely, we also had founders who were brilliant, but wouldn't budge from their visions when, we gave them advice. And those were generally our investments that went to zero. So when evaluating a startup opportunity for investment, my second criteria, like I'm sure most of you here, is product market fit. So specifically, one needs to evaluate what industry gap or deficiency does the company or the product that they're offering solve. And then we need to decide whether the product itself will sufficiently serve this gap. So this is where one asks questions such as, what does the competitive landscape look like? What market share could this business be reasonably expected to procure? What are the barriers to entry? And could a large incumbent quickly come in and replicate the product or service to crush the startup before they get out of the gate? And this is another way, frankly, of assessing whether the company has or can attain a first mover advantage and subsequently build a proverbial moat to shield out competitors. But before you answer any of these questions, you need to keep it simple and decide, if this is a true industry gap that needs to be addressed in the first place. One thing I used to say to founders is, are you addressing a market gap or are you creating one? And you'd be amazed at how often it's the latter when the founders think it's the former. And another critical aspect of building out a successful startup is listening to the market, and specifically listening to your customers. So a startup founder is extremely unlikely to succeed if the company is not responding to an actual need, and especially if the business isn't listening to the individuals who are generating revenue for the company. So customers will tell you what they like, they'll tell you what they don't like, and it's crucial to take that feedback very seriously. Whether you're selling direct-to-consumer products and you're relying on customer reviews, or you're selling software, or you're selling advertising, or really anything consumer-facing, adjusting your product or service specifications according to what customers are telling you is absolutely critical to the long-term success of any startup. And then, thinking of raising capital, in order to successfully raise capital, once you've established the strength of the founding team and their respective experiences and why they're germane to the current business, and then once you've clearly outlined product market fit, there are a few crucial items to include in investor materials, such as your deck, your financial forecast, and your data room. And these include things like a comprehensive go-to-market strategy, target sectors, and the type of clients that you either have closed or will pursue, basic revenue economics, such as margin you can make on deals, and whether these engagements are recurring, whether it be monthly, quarterly, annual, or otherwise. There are obviously lots of ways to raise capital successfully. For me personally, I generally prepare a short deck anywhere between 8 and 10 slides for the purposes of scheduling an introductory pitch, then share a longer version which encapsulates the full scale of partnerships, revenue streams, margins, use of proceeds, long-term vision for the company. Then, of course, the final step is to populate your data room with a fully baked out financial model, cap table, insider holdings, and so on. So obviously each strategy as it relates to how you approach prospective investors will depend on the style of capital you're raising. So number one, whether it's a convertible debt, debenture, safe, equity round, or otherwise. Then one also needs to consider whether you've already taken on capital and have to deal with issues such as facilitating pro rata rights, potential dilution to current shareholders. And then, of course, the size of the round and the sector in which you're operating, as well as the style of stakeholders you're pitching. And who you're pitching is really important, and something that I didn't learn until my third startup. Groups like, say, institutional investors, VC firms, hedge funds, or investment banks are looking for a markedly different set of characteristics than our stakeholders like angels, family offices, or brokers. But the one commonality, as I'm sure most of you know across the board, is that by slide, call it 4 or 5, investors generally start to skim your materials. So if you don't have your attention by then, you're generally toast. Now, as I mentioned earlier, while I was working in venture capital, I did start to learn from my portfolio companies, and especially learn, frankly, from their mistakes. One of my favorite sayings is that the only thing better than learning from your own mistakes is learning from the mistakes of others. So at the end of 2016, our firm made several investments in esports and gaming. This was Q4 of 2016 specifically. And for those that are newer to those two industries, like many sub-verticals within entertainment, esports and gaming is supported by several revenue streams, including broadcasting, streaming, sponsorship, merchandise, ticketing, food and beverage, and concessions, as well as gambling. But what makes gaming particularly interesting is not only its growth as an independent sector, but that gaming has really accelerated the convergence of several already well-established industries. So while I grew up idolizing hockey players, many of the world's most popular personalities today aren't hockey players, they're not basketball players, they're not football players, they're influencers, they're streamers, and they're teenagers sitting in front of their computers playing video games. Now, there are several reasons that investors or sponsors or advertisers are clamoring to get into gaming. It provides them with an opportunity to access a very coveted demographic, one that's young, tech savvy, highly engaged, and has a high propensity to spend their budget on entertainment and on brands that market to them authentically. So that's why in 2017, I started founding my own gaming companies. And the reason I started to found my own companies is I felt gaming startups at the time were not adequately serving the industry. So for context, in 2016, mainstream entertainment not only began to really take notice of esports and gaming viewership, but prominent stakeholders such as NFL, NBA owners began to aggressively invest capital into the sector. And this included investment in publishers who are individuals that create games or titles. It included investment in analytics tools that measured player performance or user behavior within these platforms. It included gambling marketplaces. And then most interestingly, in 2016, it included the emergence of franchise models. So for those that are maybe newer to the franchise model, whether in gaming or traditional sports, it simply constitutes paying a fee for the right to operate a team in a given geographic region. So you pay the franchise fee for the right to, say, operate a team in Washington, D.C., then once you secure those rights, you build out revenue streams around that asset. And those are the revenue streams I just mentioned: your sponsorship, your broadcast, your merchandise, food and beverage, live events, and so on. But the big difference between sports and gaming is, and frankly, part of the reason that I have not in recent years subscribed to investing in esports teams or organizations, is that unlike traditional sports, gaming does not have lucrative linear broadcast rights underpinning the industry. And what I mean by that is, for those on the call that are like NBA fans, the reason a Kevin Durant, as an example, makes such a large base salary is because of linear broadcast rights and RSNs, or regional sports networks, that are paid to the league and then distributed to teams. That's really the linchpin of the entire sector. Gaming does not have that benefit. Additionally, there are also inherent risks related to the shelf life of an esports game or a gaming title. So in other words, we know basketball is going to be really popular in 10 years, in 25 years, probably in 50 years. But the same could very well not be true of a title like Overwatch or PUBG or Fortnite. And frankly, this is just a byproduct of investing in a space where consumer preferences are largely dictated by teenagers, and where trends are largely dictated by a much younger audience than is the case in traditional sports. But so at the time in 2016 and 17, franchising in esports was beginning to mimic traditional sports, and specifically what we had seen in traditional sports over the past 60 years. And part of the reason is that most individuals that were buying esports or gaming franchises were NFL owners who were simply importing a business model that had worked for them, and perhaps more importantly, that they understood innately. So as an example, the first league to really do this for context was Overwatch League. So in season 1, starting prices for a franchise were $20 million USD. And 12 teams bought in, including NFL owners like Robert Kraft, who owns the New England Patriots, Stephen Ross, who owns the Miami Dolphins, Stan Kroenke, who owns the LA Rams, the Denver Nuggets, and a litany of other assets, as well as Glazer, who's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers owner. So that was sort of what started this trend. And then in season 2, the league expanded into 8 additional cities, and the fee went up to $35 to $40 million USD per franchise. Now, one of the advantages of this model and why I was interested in it at 16, 17 is that teams are placed in certain cities and then compete against one another. Same model as sports. But unlike, say, the National Football League that has to deal with travel logistics, play its games in a physical stadium, in esports, because much of the industry is digital, one team could play in Los Angeles against another team in London, England, or against another team in Beijing, China. And so this dynamic lent itself to a more global reach than traditional sports. And it's one of the biggest advantages that esports continues to have relative to traditional sports. So in 2016, as capital was pouring into franchises, my first business was actually an esports organization that owned teams in multiple titles or games. And we did end up selling that asset to a current NFL owner, and it was what became one of these teams in the franchiseable leagues. My second gaming company, as Dean pointed out during the introduction, came about when I met an individual named Len Asper, who owns Anthem Sports and Entertainment, which is a holding company for assets like the Fight Network, Access Television, which is a big music network that Mark Cuban is a prominent stakeholder in, and Impact Wrestling. And we noticed that major agencies weren't serving the esports space. This, of course, is no longer the case and hasn't been for years. But in 2017, when stakeholders like Creative Artists Agency were just starting to represent gamers, we thought there was an opportunity to come together, and that was sort of the context within which we founded Rumble Gaming, which is an esports talent agency that currently represents about 500 clients globally. So it's a great business, still operates to this day, does 7 figures in annual revenue. So I was the CEO of Rumble Gaming until February 2021, when I stepped down to focus full-time on operating and growing my third business, which is currently GameLancer Media, but at the time was a company called Wonder Gaming. And Wonder Gaming, I founded in May of 2019. It was a vertically integrated entertainment company, and we sought to invest in and acquire assets which were peripheral to esports and gaming. In other words, no teams, no franchises, but tech assets that you could plug into any game, into any title, that were totally agnostic. And so we raised 2 rounds of private financing. And then in February of 2021, we embarked on our go public financing. We oversubscribed by approximately 2x and then merged through a shell and engaged in an RTO, or a reverse takeover, which is a mechanism unique to Canada, as I'm sure most on this call know. And then we subsequently listed on the Canadian Securities Exchange in May of 2021. So we operated as Wonder Gaming until Q1 of just this year, when we raised an additional $10 million Canadian to facilitate the cash portion of our acquisition of GameLancer. The transaction closed in April of this year, and as part of the deal, we changed our company name to GameLancer Media and are now publicly traded on the Canadian Securities Exchange in Canada, the OTC Exchange in the United States, and on the Frankfurt Exchange in Germany. So 3 quick things I want to discuss before I get into media and entertainment trends and why we decided to buy GameLancer. I discussed raising capital, and you now know that my first 2 businesses stayed private while I took my third public. And that's another very important consideration when speaking to early stage investors. What is their path to liquidity? How long are they going to need to wait to realize a return to get their money out? Are you planning to exit? And if so, what's the time horizon? To which type of stakeholders could you feasibly sell your business to? And so we decided to go public for a few reasons, but the biggest 2 were it provided investors with a quick path to liquidity. And it was at a time, we're talking Q1 2021, when public markets were very frothy, especially public markets in the gaming sector. So this enabled us to raise a lot of money very quickly, which then, of course, afforded us a significant runway. As P.T. Barnum once said, money is a terrible master, but an excellent servant. So it enabled us to get a lot of dough in the door and to ensure that we could operate for several years. One thing I'll mention, those considering or in the process of going public, is to be extremely cautious and methodical about how you do so. This includes choosing your shell very, very carefully if you decide you want to RTO, ensuring it's a clean shell with a strong cash position, that those who own the shell are either escrowed or not in a position to dump shares, that you're eating early paper. that you're giving to them, as well as being careful about the style of warrants you offer. If you're too generous and your stock opens well, you're likely going to be exposed to warrant stripping, whereby participants on the RTO, sell commons and hold the warrant. So these are all sort of considerations I always like to flag for founders that are looking to take a company public. And lastly, this is maybe a bit more obvious, but be prepared for swings in your stock price that are totally out of your control, such as broader market or sector conditions. And you need to be aware that managing shareholder expectations and emotions is a full-time job. So make sure that's something you want to deal with. My co-founder and I personally quite enjoyed and we're ready for it, but a lot of founders, I just like to caution that it is a considerable and onerous undertaking. So just ensure that you're up to the challenge. Now a bit more about sort of why GameLancer. So GameLancer Media Corp, we are a network that sells advertising. So more specifically, you now know we're a publicly traded entertainment company. And what we do is we provide creative and curated content to some of the world's largest brands. Our long-term partnerships include flagship companies like Samsung, Belkin, Royal Bank of Canada, as well as several partners at Disney, ESPN, and ABC, such as the National Hockey League, NCAA Division I football, and the National Football League. We host privately owned broadcasts, meaning we own the network, and we distribute content across our owned and operated channels, which generates approximately 1.8 billion views per month. We have a little over 33 million subscribers on TikTok, Snapchat, and Instagram. And our subscribers are located in the United States, Canada, the UK, and Australia. So English-speaking countries, very sort of attractive demographic for brands. Most of our users are Gen Z and millennials. And our network grows by about 75,000 users every day. So since our channels are owned by us, we are able to control, what is distributed, when it's distributed, where it's distributed, into which regions, and to whom it's distributed. We can also extrapolate data on our followers and know exactly which content is performing well on our network when we do post or distribute content. And this enables us to guarantee a certain amount of views, impressions, click-throughs that are delivered specifically through our network to our brands and to our partners. And it also enables us to have a lot of certainty around, what we can deliver, that we're going to hit, the reps and warranties we're making to our partners, and to price our packages competitively and accordingly, while delivering phenomenal value to our advertising partners. But essentially what we do is we act as a conduit between our partners that I mentioned, whether it be in sports, direct to consumer, retail, banking, and our audience, which again, as I said, is largely comprised of Gen Z and millennial subscribers that are very challenging for advertisers to access. So many brands come to us and they don't know how to reach Gen Z millennials. They don't know how they consume content, how to authentically sell to them. And we listen to our consumers, and their preferences actually very much inform how we advertise, for instance, within TikTok, to help brands commercialize and convert products into our audience. And we made this transition during a massive shift in the world of marketing and advertising with the explosion of TikTok and advertising to Gen Zs especially, which I characterize as 12 to 26-year-olds, has evolved to better serve its customers. Not only do we ensure the content of our campaign resonates with the Gen Z demographic, but the transformation of the advertising sector, into short form content has really created an opportunity for companies like ours to demonstrate to blue chip brands the power of TikTok advertising, and especially the power of advertising through very entertaining and snackable 5 to 7 second clips that grab consumer attention and leave them wanting more. So as most probably know in this call, TikTok's the #1 platform for which marketers have increased their investments and their marketing budgets for 2022. And TikTok's really where we've gone all in. The vast majority of our network resides there. It's where we sell most of our partnerships. And for a long time, businesses didn't take TikTok seriously. They saw it as a platform for Gen Zs to make short, funny videos. And what makes GameLancer Media special is we built a community. And that's really what makes TikTok unique, is its ability to foster and to build community. And the best brands on TikTok are ones that work together with the users, ones that contribute to these communities rather than pulling users out of their experience. They're on TikTok to have fun and to get away as an escape, and we don't want to pull them away from that. We want to blend our advertising and how we incorporate brands into that experience. And this is how users often find themselves in a position where they're inspired to shop even when they weren't originally planning to do so. So brands are starting to realize that while users may first go to a platform for funny videos, they tend to stay for the authenticity and the community building, which are really great pillars for brand loyalty. TikTok users are also consuming less of other content. So data shows that Gen Z TikTok users, as an example, tend to listen to fewer podcasts. They tend to watch much less TV. Almost none have linear cable than their millennial counterparts. And so from a brand perspective, imagine the power of having your audience's undivided attention. And this presents an incredible opportunity for social media marketers to capitalize on this attention to reel in their audience and to drive more engagement. So a couple of additional trends on social before I wrap up, especially TikTok advertising. Many of these shifting dynamics are really what informed our decision to acquire GameLancer Media and to really go all in on this vertical. You know, as folks on this call know, every generation grows up alongside different technologies, which shape everything from communication preferences to how ideas are shared. And social media has been, a breakthrough that not only changed the way we interact with one another, but also the way brands market. And so, fast forward to today, and we see social media continuing to undergo a transformation once again as shopping and live commerce takes center stage. But although these developments are new to previous generations like Gen X or even to a lesser extent older millennials who watch social media evolve, they're actually expected by generations that were born into a social media savvy world. So for brands, there's this ongoing battle for the attention of this Gen Z generation that was basically born into TikTok. So, we're all familiar with the rise of TikTok, accelerated during the COVID pandemic in 2020, and the momentum hasn't stagnated. The app has actually created, I would argue, an increasing thirst for short form content. And platforms like TikTok tell a story of how younger generations like Gen Z prefer to engage online. So one thing that's clear from the list of up and coming social media platforms is that younger consumers crave authenticity. And that pertains to authentic marketing and demand for transparency from brands. So it's no longer about the flashiest marketing campaign, as more budget sometimes is unlikely to buy trust with a new generation. Brands are just looking to build relationships with Gen Zs, and we are seeing brands increasingly revamping their old marketing habits. Brands that are successfully diversifying their strategy and earning credibility of these TikTok communities are really seeing a lot more success, and that's a lot of times through leveraging influencer collaborations. One trend that's undeniably true is, celebrities as they were conceptualized when I was growing up or when I was a teenager throughout the 90s or 2000s or even 2010s, celebrities are no longer hold the same weight with Gen Zs that influencers do. And almost half of Gen Zs claim that they make purchasing decisions based on a recommendation from an influencer. And so the right influencer can really help shape the relationship that you have with an audience on social media. And brands, are increasingly seeing the need to find the right influencers who embody your brand's voice and your personality. So for instance, when GameLancer Media, when we run a campaign for a direct-to-consumer product, like say G Fuel or Celsius, the influencers we're using for those kind of campaigns are markedly different than those we're employing for campaigns with partners, say in financial services, such as our campaign with Royal Bank of Canada, which is around financial literacy and helping increase financial literacy among Gen Zs and encouraging Gen Zs to become retail banking partners of RBC. And then take that a step further, and the creators we're using for content around our sports campaigns, with say the National Football League, are also markedly different because what we're trying to do is expose Gen Zs to ESPN Plus and to get them more subscribers for their sports packages. But GameLancer prides itself on listening to our fans, knowing where our users are discovering products and where they're finding inspiration on social media to help inform how we shape our brand campaigns. So we're a network that creates, again, curated content strategies that really provide an avenue for brands to create these deeper, more authentic relationships with their consumers. couple of final notes that I'll make here, and then I want to leave some time for Q&A. So I had mentioned in 2021, TikTok actually became the most downloaded app in the world. And the success of TikTok inspired other social media networks to launch short form video options, which we saw on Instagram and YouTube as an example. But another important trend is the emergence of the increased prominence of private social messaging, which really came to the forefront when WhatsApp especially reached 1 billion users in 2016. Social media sites are already taking advantage of the increased use of social messaging by allowing advertisers to highlight their brand in users' newsfeed. So anyone who frequents Facebook, as an example, or Instagram, which of course is there in Facebook, can attest to how effective and targeted advertising is becoming to your interests. And social messaging particularly resonates with millennials who crave personalization, transparency, and again, a collaboration that's native to these messaging apps. So you can expect, I think, to see much more. As an example, customer service chatbots are going to have increased communication with customers, or whether they be existing or new customers, and we're going to be seeing increasingly reduced response times on social media. And then a last trend to monitor is the increase in paid advertising. So in 2016, as I'm sure most of you know, Facebook changed its algorithm to prioritize posts from friends and family over brands, which caused less traffic to be sent to content sites. So as a result, it was harder for brands to achieve results from purely organic social traffic. This means that if brands want their pages to be seen, they have to pay for social media advertising. However, the increase in competition has caused paid social media advertising prices to rise. So social media ad spend, for context, was 180 billion in 2021. It's expected to grow to as high as 350 billion annually by the end of next year. But this rise and success of influencer marketing, it isn't going anywhere. And again, the last point, this does go hand in hand with increased personalization. You know, as the amount of data available to marketers continues to rise, businesses can provide social media users with more and more personalized content. So in other words, personalization ensures that you show the right ads to the right people at the right times. And we have seen a massive increase in the amount of content published online. And if your social media content lacks personalization, there's a considerably lower chance that it's going to resonate with the users. And this is really part of the secret sauce at GameLancer. In addition to our ability to geo-fence campaigns into relevant regions or to age-fence products to the appropriate age group, we pride ourselves on understanding the consumer preferences of our users. We pride ourselves on caring, about what they want to see, which brands they want to engage with. And then we curate our brand campaigns according to what our fans are telling us, either directly or through their user behaviors. So in summation, GameLancer, you now know, is this large network where we sell advertising predominantly within TikTok, work with a lot of great direct-to-consumer retail, banking, sports, quick serve restaurants, and are now going to be increasing into software, automotive, insurance, and more traditional sectors. But that's us in a nutshell. Would love to chat with a lot of you afterwards if you have thoughts, advice, questions. And I always like to close these talks with just a couple of general rules and principles I live by professionally, especially as a founder. And these apply to those, I think really in any industry. Number one, always iterate and evolve. This is especially true for failures. Admit them, own up to them, and learn from them. What I didn't mention when I went over my professional background are the times I contributed to a shitty player signing or a bad trade, occasions where I passed on companies that would have generated massive returns for investors, or instances where I've struggled to raise capital for one of my companies. But I've learned significantly more in my career from failing than I have from succeeding. And I'll tell you, it's really easy to tell stories about a time you knocked it out of the park, but how one responds to failure tells me a lot more about who they are, what they're made of, than hearing them run through their successes. So whether I'm hiring staff or I'm considering buying a company, learning about how a prospective employee or acquisition target responded to failure demonstrates to me whether or not they're resilient and have what it takes to get off the mat and bounce back. My other comment is, whether it's sports or becoming a founder, these paths are very circuitous and there's really no true path to achieve what your goals are. I just told you that I went from being an economist to working on team side to working in venture capital to working in gaming. So I'm always very quick, especially when I'm speaking to young people that ask what the right path is, to remind them that there are many paths to sort of get to where you want to go. And then the other thing I always say, and this is probably because I work with a lot of Gen Zs, is don't just jump in and start doing. What I mean is that in my experience, a lot of young people live in a world of information and stimulus overload, which can lead to quick and spontaneous decisions. So try to avoid that in your companies and in your careers. I'm always a huge proponent of taking a step back, being strategic, skating to where the puck is going, identifying emerging trends, being early, being diligent about building your knowledge base in these areas so you can differentiate yourself, and then demonstrating value to investors and customers once you have your strategy. Last point is don't be afraid to reach out to people who know more than you and ask for advice. Put your ego aside, ask people to explain something to you if you don't get it. I just told you that our core business at GameLancer Media is selling advertising on our TikTok network. If you think for a second I understand which content resonates within our ecosystem more than the 22 to 29-year-olds who work for me, you're sorely mistaken. As I like to remind my co-founder, if I'm ever the smartest person in the room, we're all fucked. And this was a mistake I commonly made in my 20s, but it's really important, I think, for everyone to always bear in mind that there's nothing wrong with telling someone, including an investor or a client, I don't know the answer, but I'll find out. And then very, very last point, and this is critical in the world of entrepreneurship, the importance of teamwork. I'm stealing this idea from Barack Obama, who made this point at the MIT Sloan Sports Conference a few years ago. And it really resonated with me. You can tell when someone is putting the team first and using their skills to fit into the greater good versus people that just want to be in the headlines. And, in the words of Harry Truman, it's amazing what can be accomplished when no one cares who gets the credit. So I always like to tell our folks, whether they be executives or junior staff, to bear that in mind. So that's all I have for me now. If we have time for Q&A, happy to field a few questions.
Yeah, we definitely do. So if you're camera shy and don't really want to speak up, you can put it in the chat. One of the things that you said actually really resonated. It's really funny because our founder, Kevin, just sent us some pictures from this weekend where people were playing Millennial Monopoly. And it was targeted specifically for, obviously for the younger generations. And it talks about how you start with less money because experiences are everything. And so the kind of targeted advertisements for different generations are just incredible. Seeing stuff like this pop up. I had never even heard of it until he put it up.
Nor have I. You just told me about it now.
Yeah. And so, I mean, instead of Park Place, they have the 3-day festival. So it's about that type of stuff. So a real life experience right there that just kind of happened last weekend that we found out about. But does anybody have any questions? Does anybody want to make any comments, share any of their experiences?
Advice would be even better than questions if anyone has that.
Yes. There you go. Really? Everyone just camera shy? Adrian, I know you have a question.
Unfortunately, I came in like in the last 5-8 minutes of the talk. I like to always have questions, but not this time. Sorry.
Well, you made it. That's all that counts. So, anyone else? Well, if anybody can think of anything, don't hesitate to let us know, and we can kind of get it out there. Oh, Tino.
Yeah. Quick question. We're raising our seed rounds. So do you do angel investment on behalf of everyone in the group probably is interested?
Oh, I apologize. Is it cutting out on my end, or is it just me? I'm having trouble hearing you.
Okay. I was wondering, probably on behalf of everyone in the group, if you ever make angel investment.
I have. Yeah, I've made about 8 to 10 over the past few years. I've put most of my resources into GameLancer Media right now, but I'm always willing to look at materials, whether it be from a guidance perspective or from me personally investing. Yeah, I'll look at anything and everything.
Fantastic.
I'll send you some material.
Cool.
Perfect.
It might be outside of your zone, but I'd love your input anyway. Maybe it'll intrigue you. Thank you.
Cool. My pleasure. And yeah, Dina, I can also send our company overview if any folks want to like connect afterwards about whether it's just sharing best practices, wanting to work together, whatever. Where I don't know what the process is, but happy to send that over to you afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be perfect. And then we can kind of get it out to everyone. And then don't forget that you can always look people up through the platform. So if you have any other questions or if you want to make any comments, please do not hesitate to do so. Oh, there you go, Stephen.
I have a comment and a question, but I'll start with the comment. First is thanks for the time, the presentation. I loved your journey, just hearing about it. I was just walking in Manhattan. I'm in San Francisco, but I was just visiting a friend in Manhattan. So I was walking by NYU. So just you sharing your journey. And I really like the end of your talk about learning most from the failures. And my question, and you could go out any direction on this, is just entertainment, sports, social media. If there's any it's a kind of drama. There's a lot of drama in those fields. And so and I think what you said about having support, and there's having support with your co-founder, other people, but I think trust, especially navigating the business side of things, is a challenge. And just any advice or just experience about navigating games that people play. And I mean, that's kind of a loaded question. Just kind of off the top of my head, there's a lot of games.
Question. Listen, it's funny because I didn't incorporate that in my talk, but I do tell people privately, and I guess now publicly, that's my number one characteristic to go into business with someone, particularly as a co-founder, is like, do I trust you? Like, what's your track record? Are you a duplicitous person? And like a lot of us, I've learned that the hard way and the easy way. But the two biggest buckets I was looking for when I've always thought founders that go it alone are either geniuses or maniacs, because I've never had the stomach for that. But John Dwyer is my co-founder at Wonders, who's obviously one of my closest friends. And he was an individual. We developed a fast friendship and a trust, somewhat akin to siblings. And that was, frankly, a box that had to be checked for us to go out and raise $40 million together and go public and build this company. The other piece to this is I'm a big proponent of bringing on folks. I know we talk a lot about the importance of diversity. That's a big focus of our company. But I'm also a big proponent, in addition to diversity, whether it's social background, race, what have you, of thought and of experience. So John, for context, is an exceptional capital raiser. Had a little of experience in entertainment, but had built businesses in copper and grain, and he was really just a serial entrepreneur. I more had the nuts and bolts on like how to operate an entertainment company, why we should be buying certain things, and John's the best capital raiser I've ever met. So it's a great marriage. And our third partner filled another bucket that neither of us had around. He was essentially our CTO, because we are not technically, I would say we're not technically capable people. Yeah, certainly not our skill, but trust was far and away the biggest bucket. And I've been burnt by that a few times, where I either didn't do my due diligence or someone surprised me with how they behaved. And the other thing I'll mention, Steve, I'm sure you agree, a big red flag I look for is when my co-founders or my executives are not forthcoming or generous with their networks. I'm a big proponent of like, once you're in business with me, my network's your network. I don't keep my cards close to my chest, and I'm going to trust you with these relationships I've fostered. And I've met a lot of folks that are not sort of that mindset, where their relationships are theirs and they need to keep arm's length. And that's a big thing for me at the company, is that we share one another's networks for the betterment of the company as a whole. And I'm going off on a tangent, but that was a great open-ended question. So I'm just
super helpful. I appreciate it.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for the question.
Where are you located now? Are you in Canada?
Yeah, we're headquartered in Toronto. We have offices in Montreal, our production studios in Vancouver, and then our headquarters in the US is in Los Angeles. So I'm usually sort of split between, I live in Toronto, but I'm in LA 2-3 months a year, and Montreal here and there. How about you?
San Francisco.
The best city.
Thanks.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Well, fantastic. Mike, thank you so much for being here with us today. We are actually going to be posting this because it was recorded. We're going to be posting it up on the platform. It should be up within the next 24 hours. And so if anybody has any questions, if anybody wants to get in touch, let us know. And other than that, we really appreciate you being here today. It was very, very insightful presentation, and thank you again.
My
And
pleasure.
everyone,
Thank you so
everyone for joining.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun. And as I said, I'll share the Game Lancer media materials. And if anyone wants to reach out subsequent to this, I love chatting with intelligent folks and founders and anything in between. Thank you so much.
Good. Thank